Hello and welcome to the Business of the Business podcast. I am your co-host, JP John Paz, from the two-man power trip of wrestling. Of course, joining me is Mr. Trump Mania himself, my co-host, Mr. Lavi Margolin. Lavi, what's going on today, sir?
Today is a big and special day. Our first second-time guest. However, we have a pattern going with second-time guests. The answer is Western New York. Brett Lauderdale is originally from there. Brandon Thurston of Wrestlenomics is based there. And we've been waiting anxiously, and we're so happy that it's dropped. The Pro Wrestling Industry Report 2021, 71 pages of metrics, analysis, and insight for major pro wrestling companies. So we're excited to discuss that with Brandon today. Brandon, how are you doing?
Hello, John and Lavi. Thanks for having me. I didn't know Brett Lauderdale was from Western New York. Where's he from?
The specific town I don't have handy, but I know that he mentioned it because it just stood out to me. I was like, how many great people do we have from Western New York? However, we're building it up downstate here in my town. That's also where Gavin Bridge lives. So we have some analysis cachet right here in the Bronx.
Very nice.
I thought Brett was from Philly.
I think he moved there later. I had,
okay.
I think it was on our first podcast with him that we talked about it, that he was from there. And now we have, I think, the guy from WrestleMap. Not sure if the guy from WrestleTix, like it's really obviously Mookie. So you guys are well represented upstate.
Yes.
Yeah, why does all the smartest guys come from that area? What's going on?
Something in the water. Now, I am not the WrestleTix person, but I've heard that he's from Buffalo.
Yes. Actually, it was Brett that asked me. I was like, nope, I can in spirit, but I can't program like that. I do it by hand. Old school.
He kind of stole your gimmick, though, Lavi. WrestleTech stole your gimmick.
I didn't mind, especially with the AEW stuff. Like, it was like Ring of Honor once or twice a year, right? Back in the day, they'd like go bigger than like 2,000 seats. So that would take a while. But like once it was AEW and it's at least 3,000 or 4,000 seats every show, I had to be retired no matter what.
So, Brandon, what is going on with the business? Because I know there's a big pie, and let's say it's $1.4 billion, and WWE's got $1 billion of it. But what's going on? What's like the big theme in wrestling? Is it making money? Is it not making money? Is WWE only making money? What's the latest?
Well, WWE's making money. AEW's making revenue. I don't know about profit. New Japan is still challenged by the pandemic and the restrictions that are still in place in Japan. Japan is much more cautious than the U.S. is. Those are the three big companies that I focused on in the report. It's hard to say what the finances are of Impact. We know that Ring of Honor is not going to be anything like it was in the past, the Sinclair subsidiary. But the biggest companies in the world are doing well, driven by the explosion in media rights fees, which was, of course, a topic of Thursday's earnings call for WWE.
If media rights fees were around when WCW was around, I know they were kind of on their own networks, but do you think that they would probably still be alive and kicking? I mean, they would probably gotten a ton of money from media rights fees.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Whenever I'm asked about stuff that's like pre-2014, I'm always like, oh yeah, I should know more about that. I mean, it would undoubtedly, because it's live and it's sports, it wouldn't have just been canceled the way that it was. You guys might know more about the details of the demise of WCW than I do, but just that there was, even in its declined state towards the end, I would think that it would be putting up ratings that would be strong enough to justify a continued position on television, especially if the situation is what it is now, where part of the reason why those live properties are so valuable is that the scripted content is far less watched, and sort of everything else has shed away, leaving live sports left standing here, along with few other things like cable news, as some of the most watched programs on television.
Didn't football not break records, but come close, like to some records? So, like live sports, depending on the sport, obviously, is pretty damn popular.
Yeah, NFL had a great year. It seemed like NFL ratings were benefited by having fans in attendance, where for most of the NFL season in 2020, there weren't fans in attendance. That had a big effect on WWE's ratings, where WWE had a really hard year in 2020 for their TV ratings with no fans in attendance, and that's what prompted them to invent the Thunderdome, which cost them a little bit more than it was costing them to be on the road when they were touring. But ratings in July in 2021 did improve substantially for WWE Raw and SmackDown, and Raw has had ratings challenges throughout the fall going against Monday Night Football. But SmackDown has held up pretty well, and they're doing consistently 1.1, 1.2 million viewers lately. We'll see what Raw does. We're only in 2 weeks in to no football competition for Raw, but they're doing well enough. The wrestling programs for WWE, and I would say Dynamite too, are doing well enough to continue to justify high media rights fees. I think the rank. I need to talk to a TV executive or something to affirm or deny my theory that your rank, especially in 18 to 49, which is what we see from Showbiz Daily, as long as that remains pretty strong, and it's something that's in the industry report, cheap plug, that there's sort of an exponential curve when you look at, say, the average 18 to 49 rating for programs. If you average all of the number ones and number twos and so on, a lot of that value, and a disproportionate amount of that value, seems to be in the top 5. There's a little bit of value left maybe in the top 10. But once you get below the top 10, it kind of becomes a flat line where there's not a lot of differentiation between the programs that are down there. And I think that's why I don't believe that NXT has driven much media rights value at all. And that's why there's probably not a ton of value for programs like Impact, even though it's probably Access's number 1 TV show. And for all I know, New Japan might be making its way to be the number 2 TV show on Access TV. But I think as long as those TV shows, Raw, SmackDown, lately Dynamite, especially since they're not going against NXT on Wednesday, as long as they remain somewhere in the top 5, and Raw and SmackDown definitely are, Dynamite's hanging around somewhere in sort of the lower area of the top 5, as long as they continue to rank strongly, I think they're going to be in a good position to get an upgrade in their media rights fees in the future. I think AEW is way undervalued, and they'll get a big multiple probably in 2024. And I think WWE will get a decent multiple too. It's hard to say what it is. I think a good base case is 1.5x. But I think they're all going to get an upgrade, and we'll have a WWE that is even wealthier, driving even more revenue than they are today. They just reported $1 billion for the first time in revenue for a year. But I think we're going to be in a future, a few years from now, where the media rights values are even greater. WWE still stands well above AEW, but they're closer, and that's sort of the exit velocity for AEW, is getting round 2 of TV rights fees, and then that you can say that business venture has really paid off.
Do you think that we're paying too much attention to the demos, considering there's no like ad split, there's nothing like that? Are we paying too close attention to it? Because that really doesn't matter for AEW for another 4 years, right? Until their deal is up, or whatever, 2 years or 3 years, whatever it is now.
Well, if you ask Tony Khan, that's all he cares about is the demo. I think the demo is the most important viewership measurement in TV, at least as it concerns wrestling programs. Now, maybe if we're talking about CNN and Fox News, maybe it's the P50 Plus that matters more. But I think, so if we think about where TV networks, especially cable networks, get their money from, and I don't know about something like Access TV, they might not be getting similar economics here because they're a smaller TV network, and they are still struggling to get coverage throughout U.S. households. But if we think about something like TNT, TBS, USA Network, not so much Fox, we'll get to Fox in a minute, but those networks, they get the majority of their revenue, not from advertising, but from carriage fees. They're charging Comcast, Cox Communications, DirecTV a fee so that they can have the USA Network and the Turner networks on their plan that they offer to customers. So that's the majority of the revenue. about a quarter of their revenue is advertising. So one would think that, but where are they getting? What's supporting those carriage fees? Probably a lot of live sports or whatever the most popular programs are. And so you could make an argument that, well, isn't P2 Plus pretty important? Because no matter what age somebody is, as long as they're paying their cable bill, they're contributing to these economics. They're contributing to supporting the carriage fees, which are the majority of at least major cable networks' revenue. So I don't think P2 Plus is inconsequential. I don't think that it doesn't matter. But I think 18 to 49, first of all, is the most valued ad demographic. And it tells you something about where the future of TV is going to be. Whether we're thinking about whether this program is going to be valuable on linear TV or whether this program is going to be valuable on some other platform, which is something we need to think about in the future as far as these new TV deals that they sign. Let's say they're 4 or 5 year TV deals and they go from 2025 to 2029. What does media consumption look like at that point? I think we're going to end up where my latest belief is I think we're going to end up with, at least at WWE, I don't know about Dynamite, maybe. We're going to end up with some of these programs in some way broadcast on streaming. And maybe it's the case that, for example, Raw is on the USA Network still, but some of the episodes can also be watched live on Peacock or something like that. I think there's going to be some sort of distribution like that, where it's probably the linear TV network that also owns the streaming platform that this thing is also streamed on, so that if streaming wins out and linear really falls away, that there's you don't want probably Amazon, for example, to have the streaming rights and USA Network to have the linear rights in case there's a loser in that distribution breakdown. But yeah, there's a tangent. I don't remember what your question was, John, but
Well, yeah, but you hit on it with the demo. Obviously, it is important to them to see where the trend is going. But as a whole, the business, are we optimistic about the future? Are you concerned? Is wrestling less popular, more popular? What are you thinking about the future of the business?
Wrestling is less popular, but it's more lucrative. I have no concerns about the wrestling business ceasing to exist or declining. It's going to be, at least the WWE and AEW, I think, have very bright financial futures. WWE is going to continue to become more profitable over time because their TV rights fees, it almost doesn't matter what their TV viewership is. I mean, you want your TV viewership to be strong so that you can justify strong TV deals in the future. But if the rating tonight for Raw, we're recording on Monday, is terrible, WWE doesn't make any less money immediately because of that.
Right.
Guaranteed escalating TV rights fees. If you think these TV programs aren't doing a good job, it in the short term at least, it doesn't matter. They're going to get more money this year than they got last year, and so on. So no, I think AEW is going to, as long as they continue to deliver the kinds of ratings that they are now, as long as WWE continues to rank as well as it does, those companies are going to continue to drive even more revenue, and I see no reason why their costs are going to grow dramatically. So the top 2 companies are doing really well. Everybody else, I don't know. It's tough. But we're seeing New Japan get back on TV. Impact, at least as of late, has done some decent ratings with this Ring of Honor storyline. I don't know what the future holds for, let's say, New Japan. New Japan is really coming off of a peak in interest globally, and they've lost their major stars like Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks to AEW, and AEW has really subsumed some of the place that New Japan had in the wrestling business in let's say 2018. But we've seen Ring of Honor kind of come to its demise here. It's going to be probably something, but nothing like it was in recent years. And the indies, I don't know. The indies are much different post-pandemic than they are pre-pandemic, right? This was an under-harvested independent environment in my view when it comes to talent. Triple H changed that a lot, and the arrival of AEW definitely changed that a lot. And now we've got maybe, if anything, an overharvested or properly valued in my view, wrestling talent space. So the indies are not exactly, populated with tons of great wrestling talent right now. Now, on the other hand, WWE seems to be moving away from that kind of talent, and Paul Levesque has fallen from favor. And the name, image, and likeness program is going to be used by WWE, and they're gonna draft all of these college athletes. So that's where they want to go going forward, and feed Vince McMahon more of the talent that he will actually use. So, yeah, I don't know, but I think, yeah, wrestling on top, it's great. In the middle, I don't know. On the low end, it's a very different environment on the indies than it was before the pandemic.
Bobby, I know you got a lot of questions.
Oh yes. So we're gonna do the our podcast version of the watch along, but it'll be more the read along. So if you have not bought it yet, and what are you waiting for? You should purchase a copy of the Pro Wrestling Industry Report 2021. There's a couple ways of doing that. One is the Patreon. Subscribe to the Wrestlenomics Patreon, which I'm probably mispronouncing, as well as check out Wrestlenomics in any social media form to get the direct link for PayHip and download that report. Just as a testament to my support of the report before there were these variety of options a couple of years ago. Of course, there was a regular price and then sort of like a pay as you go. And I was like, this is so valuable to me, it's worth $100. So that's what I bought the report for. So for those of you today, where you can buy it for a fraction of that cost, there's so much value to it, and we give it the highest endorsement possible.
Yes, I appreciate that. You just did all my plugs for me. That was awesome.
Yeah, nice.
I'm available for hire. No. Send some of that Patreon money my way. No.
If you're a Wall Street analyst, this might be worth tens of thousands of dollars for you. Feel free to pay that much for it too, if you want.
And they should. So I kept the reference page numbers. Hopefully I didn't mess them up as we go along. So the first, and we were talking about sort of like the companies in the middle. So that's probably going to be my focus today. Mm-hmm. So most interestingly to me, to start off, you had at the beginning of the report, page 4, a listing of the 4 major global brands. So obviously WWE, AEW, no one would argue New Japan, and then Impact. So Impact is a very interesting one, and it would probably land number 4 for me, because when you look at it in the US, you're sort of like, even like a GCW feels like a hotter brand right now when you're looking at it from just like a North American perspective. However, although sometimes people not in the know might deride their ratings on Access, right? They have national cable. They have international TV. Some have argued, what the potential rights might be for that, but they're out there. And they've really distributed so much in terms of streaming. They're basically on every platform. There's always an announcement that Impact is out there now. And they have this great presence on YouTube. So that's my argument for it. But what's yours for placing Impact as a top 4 global brand?
What comes to mind first is Google web search. And as I say that, I can see an argument why you might want to discredit that. But I guess there's other metrics to support it too, including household coverage for their TV, which is about half of the U.S. households for Access, at least the half of the cable households. But why do I value web search? I think it's an indicator, not a perfect indicator, but it's an indicator. Well, I think it's a good indicator of mind share, of how much is somebody thinking, are people thinking about a brand, a person, an entity, whatever. Not necessarily thinking well of it. I mean, WWE's biggest period ever for web search is June 2007, when the Benoit family killings happened. So it's not always good news why web search is up, but it does tell you something, I think, in general, with those exceptions. It tells you about mindshare and how much people are thinking about something, and it really benefits brands that have existed for a long time, including Impact. So Impact continues to do well above, at least on a global scale. We probably have a page that supports this here in this industry report. But Impact continues to do well above what I believe New Japan does on a global scale. Despite, New Japan is, I don't know about this pandemic year, but certainly pre-pandemic is generating a lot more revenue than Impact is in all likelihood. But yeah, it's still a company that signs people to contracts. It's after AEW and WWE, it's the company that in the United States is got the most viewership. That's not saying a lot, but it's got the most viewership after WWE and AEW, and it's got distribution in the UK and in India, and you can't. I think New Japan did get distribution in India. They don't have distribution in the UK unless I'm forgetting something. And New Japan just got TV distribution again in the US at the very beginning of this year.
Great. That makes a lot of sense. So, in terms of Impact TV ratings, pages 14, 18, and 19, sort of to get a sense of that context in the overall sphere of things, and then I sort of have a follow-up supposition.
Sure. So, sorry, what's the question?
Oh, sure. So if you can sort of walk us through sort of the ratings data that we have for the 2021 report on
Yeah.
pages 14, 18, and 19, sort of like for the main points about TV ratings for Impact and where they stand.
Sure. So Impact in 2021 averaged 121,000 viewers total. To put that in context, SmackDown averaged 2.1 million. Raw averaged 1.76 million. Dynamite averaged 942,000 viewers. NXT averaged 672,000. Rampage averaged 611,000. Those are all those programs that I just mentioned are on networks that are in the vast majority of U.S. cable households. And access, as I mentioned, is in only about half of those households. But still, they didn't do half of the viewership of, let's say, Rampage, which is the next nearest program in terms of total viewership. That would be something like 300,000 viewers. But instead, Impact is doing 121,000 viewers. And in the demo, they're only doing 44,000 viewers in the demo, whereas all the other programs are doing multiple times that. So it's when I've been seeing median viewer age too since about May, and a lot of these other demos and the median age is really volatile because, or at least it's a lot more volatile than the other programs are because the sample is smaller because the viewership is smaller. So there's a lot of strong up and down movement, but the median age for Impact is often in the late 50s. So it's an older audience, and it's an audience that, or it's a show that younger fans don't appear to make an effort to see relative to the other programs. I've noticed when there's an increase in interest or an increase in viewership, what stays the same more than other demos is the viewers who are outside of the demo. So that's the vast majority of that is people over the age of 50. And what often accounts for an increase in viewership are younger viewers. So there's plenty of examples of that, like including the Punk debut had this massive 18 to 34 tune in, and then I think those viewers are maybe following some other way and are not watching so much on live TV. But yeah, Impact's viewership is way lower than anybody else, at least the WWE and AEW programs.
So I have a supposition. So when we look back on the history of Impact, which is quite a bumpy one, certainly if you include the TNA years, but right, we sort of saw the downfall of being a number two in some ways in the U.S. with that Dixie Carter email, right? Vince Russo was still working there, but he wasn't supposed to be, and then Dixie sent an email to an executive at Spike and so on. But now, years later, Impact has finally landed or purchased a station in which their ratings are measurable and certainly at an upward trajectory to where they've been ever since the Spike days. But when we look at cable TV ratings since those days, things have tumbled down so far, let's say for Raw. So where would you guess things would meet in the middle? Let's say Impact still did fairly well on Spike, survived the rebranding on Paramount. What would you guess the ratings might have been on Paramount today if they survived all of that as compared to where they are on Access?
So, what are my conditions you're giving me here, Lavi? So I've got this program still on Spike, so it's in a high coverage network. What do you know? It's not in the report, but do you know what the viewership was on Spike at the end? So that'd be 2014, right?
Yeah, I think it was the low million, about just a little bit above a million.
I was going to say, I think it was right around 1 million viewers.
I guess I would take, and we're going in this scenario with all of the events that transpired after 2014, except for the except for they don't get kicked off the network.
Yeah, and that noting that Paramount is a lower profile network now than it had been then.
It would be certainly would be higher than what it is on Access. Would it be twice as high? I guess what happened that I think you would have to take into account is that Impact still fell from profile. It was close to, and part of that was by virtue of the condition that we're taking out here, right? Where they left Spike and they were on Destination America, and then they were on Pop TV. I mean, think about it. They were on Pop TV, and Pop TV is in a lot more households than Access is. And Pop TV is 2018, and they averaged 263,000 viewers in 2018. And maybe that's a good piece of information to try to theorize what their viewership would be if they were still on Paramount. So maybe it would be in the 200s or 300s. I don't see it being a lot higher than what it is here on Access, just because the impact, I guess I still think it's the number 4 promotion in the world, but it's still a distant, it's still a great distance away from even being the number 3, even if it's still on even if it's on a better network, I guess. I'd have to think about that. Would I say it's a higher profile than New Japan if it was still on, let's say, the modern day Paramount network? Probably, because at least New Japan can tour and sell tickets, and that's not something that Impact does beyond a few shows here and there. New Japan has a full year-round set of tours, at least when there's not a pandemic. So yeah, I think it would still be that. I guess it would be in the low to mid hundreds of thousands of viewers.
Not like Yellowstone on Paramount, I'll say that much.
That's
Doing
true.
like 10 million plus viewers, yeah.
Yeah, are you sure Paramount's got a lower profile? They got the number 1 scripted show on TV.
That's true.
Nuts.
Before that, with their Bellator and all that sort of stuff. Thinking about it from Fight Sports, but you're right. I will not deny that.
Yeah.
So next, in terms of thinking about New Japan, and we don't talk a lot of New Japan centric business from the home country, certainly from Japan, but we do look at it from a U.S. perspective. So, pages 38, 39, and 40 of the report, you look at the live events, and certainly COVID has had a major impact in terms of restrictions in Japan and what one can do in touring and even to cheer right at an arena. But what would you make of New Japan's year, and how would that meet sort of expectations?
Well, New Japan, they reported, so we get the Bushiroad report, which now we get what Bushiroad's sports division does. And Bushiroad's sports division substantially includes just New Japan and Stardom. And New Japan reported a narrow net income. So they barely escaped losing money. At least the whole sports division did. But it's a very limited scene where their average attendance was 1,000 attendees. And I think that's with me knocking off a few percent, assuming that the numbers that they put on their website are total attendances, including comps. So they've had a hard time with COVID and with COVID restrictions being a lot stricter than they are in the United States. And they've lost some star power, but you're asking about just their
Just
business in the U.S. especially.
so in Japan, just sort of like what to make out of it. Like when you look at those numbers, sort of like having seen the numbers for the past several years as well, probably the best comparison would be to 2020. Sort of like, do you think they did well compared to like what they had to work with? Does it appear to be that there's losing some shine in Japan as they have worldwide? Like, how might they be looking as they're moving into 2022 here?
I think they're still by far the number one promotion in Japan. I've seen a lot of the metrics that you'll be able to see in this report increase for Stardom, but Stardom's, I don't know that Stardom's even a number two. I think they're certainly in the conversation though. But no, I think New Japan is in an okay position. I know there's been a lot of criticism of the booking during the pandemic, and the creative doesn't seem to be as good. And it's definitely the case that I think that there are glory eras for certain promotions in certain time periods. And we can think back to All Japan and New Japan in the 90s was a peak period for both those companies. And New Japan in the 2010s was a peak period for New Japan. And that period is clearly over with. I think they're going to have a tough time. I think we could say this is that they're going to have a tough time in whenever they can have a year where there aren't COVID restrictions anymore, that they're going to have a tough time equaling, let's say, their 2019 business or their 2018 business, because it's the stars are not as fresh unless they introduce another Okada like they did in the early 2010s. They had Tanahashi and a brand new star in Okada, and other supporting characters quickly followed that helped them have. I believe even when you adjust for inflation, there's not much inflation to adjust for in Japan. They had their biggest revenue years ever in the 2010s.
So you had mentioned the U.S. In terms of New Japan. So I'd like to center on that. So this weekend, I had my critically acclaimed report looking at the live events business in the U.S. Now that we have some 14 shows to look at that have already happened or upcoming, and it seems to be pretty clear in terms of patterns that if you have a Moxley, you're in the right city, you're in an appropriate venue, that you can do likely high, just under 2000 or a little bit over 2000. If you're in the wrong city, you don't have the right talent, you're going to suffer, in terms of hundreds of tickets sold. And, live TV tapings are live TV tapings and hard to judge. And sometimes when I think about it, I'm sort of like, why? Like, if New Japan just came to the US, they'd sort of have that cachet, even if it's dimmed a little bit, and you can do well in 4 to 6 shows and then sort of like be out of here. But by centering yourself in the US, you sort of become a little bit more commonplace, a little less special, and the brand is a little bit more murky. Somebody has to actually look, okay, who's going to be on the show? Is this a special show or is it a regular show? And I think, why bother? And one of our listeners had a great point that they're a public company. And just like in the US, public companies have to grow. And when you hit a revenue point in your home country, you have to find somewhere else to go, even if it's not as lucrative. But what do you make of New Japan in the US?
I'm sure you follow a lot more closely than I do, Lavi. I know there's New Japan Strong, and that's sometimes I hear buzz around New Japan Strong and certain matches that they have coming up. I just wonder if they're going to do anything with the Access time slot to put New Japan Strong in there, and maybe there's a at least on occasion a bigger audience to grab by putting some New Japan Strong content in there versus their domestic content. So I don't know if that's something they're even thinking about, but yeah, but it's just encouraging to see them back on Access, and at least they're back on TV in some way. And I think that's combined with the loss of talent has had a lot to do with their diminished interest in the United States, and just the fact that it's not as interesting a product because of the loss of talent and because of the pandemic, and we're watching events that don't have anything but clapping from the audience. So yeah, I just we'll see what happens with New Japan Strong, and see what happens with the Access TV, and if that helps their profile at all. But ultimately, it's going to come down to stars and to what made that promotion buzzworthy in the first place, and it was that it was producing a product that was making people recommend it and promote it. And it makes me think of like the terminology from the the Net Promoter Score. You can market your product and spend a lot of money doing so, or you can also create a great product and people will promote it for you. And that's was a big part of New Japan's global appeal in the prior era.
So when I think about Access TV and certainly the WrestleNomics Patreon that gets the ratings out as soon as they're available is the best resource for that. We've seen the ratings, and this is just the rerun programming that they're not promoting so heavily. We know in late March that there's going to be the first run programming, whatever it is, that's been going from, I believe, the 80s, 70s to 60s. But when I think about it, and a business that I followed in terms of the business size, the comic book business. So it was actually interesting in the, not to go too far, divergent, but in the 50s, DC was the ones who distributed Marvel. And they restricted Marvel to 16 titles, and they had to do it bi-monthly. So Marvel could only come out with 8 titles a month. DC was their distributor. They sort of had their foot to their neck. And when I think about the Access New Japan relationship, that's what I think about. That it's great that they're back on US TV, but Access as the as part of the corporate umbrella, Anthem with Impact will always be the favored child, the blood child, right? Whereas you have New Japan, that's always sort of will be in a dimmer spotlight. So while it's good to have national TV, I'm a little bit concerned about sort of their ability to grow on this network.
Yeah, if we were talking about the New Japan product of 2016 or 2017 on at 10 o'clock after today's Impact product, and I know they are heating up with this Ring of Honor thing, but I think there would be, if it was that hot New Japan product from a few years ago, I think we would be seeing New Japan doing close or better ratings than Impact is doing. But in this state, I don't know. I don't know. I just don't know what the base popularity of New Japan is in the pandemic era with clap crowds. Is Ibushi and I don't even know who else is Ibushi a big enough star to help New Japan be the number 3 company in the world. I just don't know. I guess what can Impact do to prevent New Japan from growing? I'm not sure. I guess there's the time slot issue, but I think they want some sort of relationship with Impact as well, and we've seen that a little bit in terms of Kojima being on Impact and Minoru Suzuki being on Impact. But New Japan's still going to produce the kind of product that it produces, and I think this is where some of my personal taste and bias comes in, but I would think that a sports-like product, even though the majority of the wrestlers are Japanese and speak a different language than the U.S. audience, that's going to help them grow interest. Are they going to become more popular than Impact? I mean, I guess in some ways they already were. Maybe if I look at U.S. Google web search over a certain time, they might have surpassed or come pretty close. And when I take into account that Impact has been a U.S. brand for, 20 years now, I think that's pretty impressive on New Japan's part.
Yeah, no, I think it's just sort of like knowing that you will never be on equal footing. You won't get the same number of bumpers. If it's in prime time, you'll be in the third hour. But hey, to be on there is much better than that Pluto streaming deal that we thought.
Roku.
The Roku, excuse me.
Yeah.
My apologies to John also, who put the Roku on my radar. But
Yeah.
that sort of thing where everyone was speculating like what networks it going to be on, and then they're like Roku, and we're like, okay, so fair enough with that. One thing that I think you really put on my radar that we often miss is the rise of Stardom, and just how much it's grown and how popular it's become. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, and there's, to be clear, I feel like I'm somebody who doesn't watch a lot of wrestling. You would think that maybe I do, but I don't watch that much wrestling. I don't know that I've ever watched a Stardom match. I've seen clips and stuff, so I don't want to give people the impression that I'm like the expert on the content of all these companies. But I've seen you Google web search, and it's on one of the pages in this report, has apparently gone through the roof. There's a big jump around the time of the death of Hana Kimura, but besides that, it's really grown. I don't know that we can take attendances very seriously in this COVID era where capacities are all over the place and limits are all over the place. My non-scientific buzzometer seems to to think that there's a lot of buzz around Stardom, more so than, I don't know, any other Japanese company below New Japan right now. There's a lot of hype around a few matches this year, or at least in the last 12 months, and it's a company that I think really to watch to see, are they going to grow in appeal even further, and maybe there's some sort of way that they can capitalize on the U.S. appeal. I know they did a WrestleMania weekend show a couple of years ago, right? But yeah, I think it's exciting to see a company that I don't know. It's women's wrestling, and that's not something that there it really isn't. I mean, other than is WoW doing anything? You guys would know. It's a company that's based on only women talent, and it's exciting some people.
Yes. So actually, we had Title Match Network on last week to talk about the top 100 YouTube channels in wrestling, and I was surprised to see WoW on there. And we have our eyes peeled for the fall, because basically they're getting, I don't know if we would go so far as to say national distribution, but near national distribution in terms of Sinclair. First CBS affiliates, and then some Sinclair support as well. So I think that'll be something really interesting to watch.
Who has more distribution, WoW or OVW?
As long as you don't tag Mr. Spectacular, we're going to say wow. Otherwise, he will debate me until the end of time. But we like him a lot and appreciate his listening and support of the show, and passion for the business, certainly. Now, you brought up a very interesting point in terms of the conclusion of the report. Something that we've sort of all been waiting for for a while is the they used to call it FANG, but now that Facebook has changed its name, is it MANG? I'm not sure.
They're still Facebook.
They're still Facebook. Okay,
Yeah.
so with Apple, like Apple kicking the tires in sports, sort of like, how likely do you think it'll be in 2022? And what would the impact be if one or two of these players gets really serious and interested in a pro wrestling brand?
Well, to an extent, WWE has a relationship with Netflix. They're going to do the documentary. There's been WWE DVD content on Netflix for forever. In the case of Facebook, we all remember the Mixed Match Challenge on Facebook Watch. It didn't seem to be too much of a smashing success. Google, WWE is one of the most popular channels on YouTube, which is an Alphabet property. Who else? Amazon? Well, Amazon deals a lot of e-commerce for WWE. They get named in the annual reports. Am I leaving anybody out? Facebook, Apple. Does WWE have any relationship with Apple? Nothing that comes to mind. They might have some sort of interaction somewhere. I don't think Apple is going to touch pro wrestling. I think Apple's brand is too prestigious to deal with pro wrestling. Maybe Apple. There are reports that Apple is interested in the NFL Sunday Ticket and maybe Major League Baseball in some way. I think the Hulu next day rights could go to one of the FANG companies. Maybe Netflix. I think that's a real possibility. I don't think that's the likeliest outcome. I don't know what the likeliest outcome is for those next day rights. I think they're going to leave Hulu. It makes a lot of sense for Peacock, but it makes a lot of sense if I'm WWE to want to create a relationship, a deeper relationship with one of these big tech players, and to maybe that scares some of these TV networks into thinking that, hey, look, we might go to we do have a lot of really wealthy suitors out there for our live rights. But I don't see any of them doing anything but WWE, and probably not even AEW. So if it's probably WWE or nothing. I wouldn't totally rule out AEW, and a lot can change between now and 2023 when they have to have these conversations. But I think AEW probably stays in the Warner Media world, and again, like I said earlier, probably at a big multiple. But W wants, and Nick Khan tells the story that tech players are interested in this. And I think what will happen is, I said it earlier, there'll be some sort of hybrid distribution of at least Raw and SmackDown in the future, where some of it at least will be through streaming to enhance the reach to the greatest possible extent, while the cable subscribers continue to be in decline. That's the story that they want, and there's probably enough truth to that to give WWE some help in justifying an upgrade in their TV rights fees next round.
Right. So, this is such interesting topics that I could sort of like go old school when they had like those 11-hour shoot interviews with Bill Watts or something.
Yeah.
So much content. But let me turn it over to John.
So AEW, profitable, not profitable? The last few years, have they ever been profitable? And was they expected to not be profitable?
Well, Tony Khan told Forbes in his Forbes profile, I don't know if it was a profile on him or on AEW, but he told them that he made a 10-figure investment in gaming, and according to him, that is the only reason why AEW is not profitable now. Take that for what it's worth. I think, I tend to believe that, I guess. AEW got an upgrade in January 2020 from their compensation was an ad revenue share and the cost of production, and got upgraded to $44 million per year on an average annual basis. I wrote in the report, spoiler alert, $84 million in revenue. What are their costs, though? That's really hard to figure out for me. And a 10-figure investment in gaming could be $10 million. It could be $99 million. So right. I don't know. And this is a company that's very much a startup. And when I was doing my preview with MJ from NJ about the WWE earnings report, I think it's appropriate to think of AEW as a growth company, as a company that's probably not profitable now, and could be, they're still in sort of the risk-taking stage, and still in the investment stage, and not yet in this profitability stage where they're a stable, mature company. They're a young company that's probably going to be profitable in the future when they sign a new TV deal at 3x, 4x or something like that. But probably not profitable now, and it's there's a lot of spending happening, obviously, both in terms of their gaming investment and in terms of a lot of the talent that they're signing. They have more talent than they need, in my view. They have a lot of talent that they've. I'm one of the pages towards the end of the report, I do a count of all the wrestlers who have had 10 matches or more in each company, and it's grown quite a bit. I think there are 180 something wrestlers who have had 10 matches or more in 2021 for AEW. Now, a lot of that, I don't know, probably not dark matches, right? In terms of, I'm saying, are there a lot of people who aren't signed who have had 10 matches? Probably not. But they signed a ton of wrestlers, and they don't have enough TV time or AEW Dark time to use them all efficiently. But whatever, it's like, I guess it's like buying a lot of stocks, and that Some of them will decline in value over time. Some of them will multiply in value over time. And if, a lot of them are duds, the ones that multiply over time more than pay for it. But yeah, they could use talent more efficiently. Probably not profitable. Like, I don't know, almost certainly not profitable at this point.
Not to go like through the roster, but like you could go through the roster and we're like, do they really need this guy? Do they really need that guy? You know what I mean? Like you kind of pick and choose. Obviously, the big names you do want them and you do need them, but you just got to wonder payroll, right? I mean, you got to wonder what it is. That number's not out there, right?
No, I don't, like when it comes to WWE, there's always a Forbes list of what they think people's pay is, and people love to share that and click on that kind of stuff. But I mean, that's an estimate at best. I don't know what I have a very loose idea. I don't feel like I have a great idea at all of what wrestlers are paid. I would have a very wide range. I was just trying to think the other day about WWE making over $1 billion and thinking about how players in major sports leagues get like 50% of the revenue. And I was trying to think about what do I think the average compensation of a wrestler is in WWE. It's probably similar to what it is in AEW. But I don't feel like I have a great handle on what that is. It could be 200,000, could be $500,000. I'm not really sure. But to try to answer your question, yeah, I think they're paying talent a lot, and they may be losing quite a bit of money right now. But it's it's like buying a stock that you put all this money in investment, and hopefully it's going to turn out to be a big gain later.
So you think about it, I think it's like UFC and maybe pro wrestling is the worst as far as the promotions making all the money and
Yeah.
right, and then
What do those two
NBA
companies
is
also
pretty
have in
good.
common? Can you think of anything?
Dana and Vince are kind of similar.
No union.
Oh, that too, yeah. It's just interesting to kind of think like, wow, they're making billions. I wonder how much the guys are getting. Obviously, the top guys, Lesnar, Reigns, I'm sure, are paid
Yeah.
handsomely. I just wonder what the rest of the roster gets. That isn't available either. Besides Forbes, that's not really available, even though they're a publicly traded company.
I have no idea what anybody gets paid. I mean, I'm confident that Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman were getting, if not $1 million downside with royalties, we're probably getting around $1 million. I'm very confident that Brock Lesnar gets paid more than $1 million. I'm very confident that Roman Reigns gets paid more than $1 million. I really don't have a clue about anybody else, though. I mean, I'm sure well into the six figures for the top names, probably upper six figures. But it could be in the millions though too. I just don't know. I mean, what we do get is Triple H's compensation gets disclosed. He's made more than $1 million in a lot of years. I mean, he hasn't wrestled now since that one match he had on Raw with Randy Orton. We do get Shane McMahon's performer pay disclosed, which was $800. I had to look it up recently because of the drama around Shane. $820,000, I believe, is what he got in 2020. So that gives you an idea of somebody. It gives you an idea of what probably like an upper level person gets is high six figures. So those are the data points that we have, but it's like two, that are on real public record.
We need like a juicy lawsuit or three, sort of like I think it was Mookie that put up all those data points years ago from the WCW
Yeah.
lawsuit. So we sort of know in like the latter days how much Meng was making, how much the
Right.
Barbarian, and
Yeah.
Maybe
that's a lot of fun to look at.
it's a long shot, but maybe this MLW lawsuit will go to discovery and we'll get some interesting records.
Oh, that would be great. I was just thinking that. Do we need some sort of lawsuit so we can start getting these records out there? That's a perfect one. Yeah. You think that's going anywhere?
It's really hard to say. The MLW lawsuit, there are I think there are three major stories there. By far the one that carries the most weight is the 2B story, right?
Yep.
That WWE, that Stephanie McMahon in the final hours before they were going to announce the deal swooped in and killed the deal, allegedly. The other, and that's, I mean, that's a plausible, believable story. Is there evidence to back up those claims? Is there evidence that one lawyer explained it to me as Stephanie could have cited a legitimate business reason, which would not violate antitrust. That she could have said that we don't want to be associated with MLW for some branding reason. And what comes to mind is you can look at the way that they've framed AEW as this violent content. I don't know if MLW is that violent, is using blood that much, but you could, whether it's reasonable or not, she could have cited some reason why they didn't want to be associated from a brand standpoint with MLW. Rather, or what would be a problem is if she said, do us a favor and kill that deal because they're another wrestling property and we don't want to be that's a conflict of interest for us. That is roughly how one lawyer explained it to me. So that's the question. Is there evidence to show that they violated antitrust in an illegitimate or in a real way? The Vice story, I can believe happened. I can believe that Vince McMahon compelled Susan Levison, the head of WWE Studios at the time, to call a Vice executive and tell them to, not to work with MLW or something. Is there evidence to back that up? I don't know. And how much does that contribute to the case? Or is it just about establishing a pattern of, anti-competitive behavior on WWE's part? And what is the third story? There's Vice, there's Tubi, and Fight. The Fight allegation sounds pretty far-fetched. That apparently there was a WWE employee who worked also as a corporate advisor for Fight, but there's no. Even the claim is sort of flimsy in that what we don't have any stories about. Did he go back to WWE and tell them, hey, look, MLW's making a deal with Fight. We better try to kill it or something. I don't know. So that's a little bit conspiratorial. We'll see. It just all depends on how much evidence there is for this. And are there emails to back this up? Are there people willing to go on the record and support these claims? I'm no legal expert, but it's something I'm going to continue to follow and try to understand. I'm looking forward to the letters that not the letters, if I'm being facetious, that the responses that Jerry McDevitt and Mark Kasowitz write to, if it's Mark Kasowitz even writing them, that are written between the two lawyers. That should be fascinating. And the other fascinating thing about it, I think, is going to be that I anticipate Jerry McDevitt is going to have to respond pretty soon, within the next couple of months. Probably move to dismiss and move to change venue. And to undermine the claim that WWE has market power or monopoly power, I think there's a great case to make that. I think you should probably, I'm not a legal expert, I would think you would make the case that, look, we don't have market power. AEW's here. And AEW is the super strong competitor. And we're going to see Jerry McDevitt perhaps talk about how great and how strong of a competitor AEW is, and we couldn't possibly have market power.
Interesting. I love his line about MLW, though. His little sarcastic quip, like, "Hey, maybe Vice was pissed that they lost, or they only had 40,000 people watch them." His response was funny. I mean, he was quick, short, and sweet about it.
And it's a fair point. It's not like they did great viewership in that Fightland special. Right. Somebody shared some data with me showing what that time slot did on average in the 4 weeks prior to Fightland, and Fightland did not outperform what the average performance was, either in total viewership or in the demo. So, yeah, I don't know. Well, I don't know what those replays did, but yeah, it's not like MLW came in there and did great viewership and should have obviously gotten more work with Vice.
Now, Brandon, before we let you go, give us all the plugs again. I know Lavi did a great job earlier, but give us all your plugs.
Sure. There's the Patreon. And if you sign up for just $5 a month, you'll get access to the industry report that we've been mentioning throughout here. You also get access to my nearly daily, just about every weekday, there is a TV rating to report on, and I report on it for patrons. You get access to all the data that I have on wrestling TV viewership, the live same-day TV viewership. There's tens of thousands of data points in the viewership spreadsheet. You get access to the audio of the live TV ratings talk program that I do every week, which is also on YouTube. And if you don't want to sign up through Patreon, you can just buy the report directly on PayHip. You can find the pay up link, as Lavi mentioned, on my social media or on Wrestlenomics.com. You can follow me on Twitter. Don't follow me on Twitter. I have enough people angry with me on Twitter at Brandon Thurston and at
Oh
Wrestlenomics.
wow, wow. Why? What the hell's going on?
Well, this is a great topic to get into. So I think I have now I have like just over 15,000 followers, which is wonderful and ego affirming. But the more people that you have, I always think of like the bigger your audience is, the more you are accessing the masses, the more it becomes like, having some friends over. If you have like, a couple friends over, your house isn't going to be trashed. But if you have tons of people over, your house is going to be trashed. And I've definitely surpassed that point. I shared I counted up the words, not by hand, but I wrote a script to count the words from earnings transcripts that showed Vince McMahon, he only talks on about 2% of the words that are uttered on an earnings call. People got very
Yeah,
upset with me.
interesting.
People are very upset with me for doing that, and I blocked many of the people who had very rude responses. I think that just fed into it. So my latest social media decision, I feel like I'm at a crossroads here. I can either fight these people or be a pacifist here, and I think I have to resist the urge to read the replies and to read the quote tweets. I wish Twitter would help me and allow me to not see the quote tweets of people who are muted, but Twitter does not want that because that probably discourages engagement.
Right.
But yeah, I have to not read the replies and things like that, and that's going to take some willpower. But that is my latest self challenge.
Nice. Yeah, you got to not worry about it and not waste your time with that nonsense.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is the TV ratings. The TV rating is like any highly influential piece of information. There are people who will read it and interpret it to suit their preconceived notions, and that's kind of what happens on a daily basis on my Twitter account in the quote tweets and things like that.
Nice. Bunch of weirdos on there. But just as far as plugs, I'll throw out mine. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Check out the website, tmptempire.com, and patreon.com/tmptempire. Lavi, what do you got?
Yes. So, of course, the business of the business is the official business podcast of SE Scoops, a great place to get your business news or your wrestling news and information. Check out my website, lioncubjobsearch.com, for the aforementioned article, The State of New Japan Pro Wrestling as a Live Event Business in the United States. And follow me on Twitter, LaVieMarg, LaVieMarg.
Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. See you right back here next week for a little business of the business. See you next